Brigadier Linda, if you follow the news and clearly some of the stories that we report on a daily basis, and anecdotal evidence that exists, it seems to me that for 13 years since the inception of this campaign back in 1999, there doesn't seem to have been much difference. What is the empirical evidence? What are the facts about this matter?
The facts remain that, Xolani, this campaign shouldn't be limited into 16 days, but it should be also be looked at to be done in 365 days a year. It's a day-to-day campaign. It should not be only be flagged on this particular kind of period.
So are you saying that because you're saying that if we continue observing it as a 16-day campaign, it is not yielding the results?
If it could only be observed at this part of period only, not on daily basis, then it won't yield good results totally.
But what do we have so far? I mean, are we fighting this? Are we winning this battle or not?
Ourselves, as the Department of Southern Police Services, we have re-established the FCS units all over the country. We have about 176 units, which we established in June in 2010. Since the re-establishment of these specialized units, we are seeing successes that are coming through.
So you re-established them because you realized that the decision, of course, to close them down was a bad decision, one, but two, were there increased numbers of cases of abuse?
Well, point of correction, these units were not closed down. They were restructured into the station level, where it was also reconsidered and reviewed by our department, and also to re-establish them at a specialized level. Sure. of cluster.
Yeah, even though some people, of course, say that was, in essence, really closing them down, because they were no longer units as we knew them before.
Well, the interpretation might differ, but this was done by our department, taking a decision that they wanted to bring the specialized services closer to the community. That was the idea.
And it never worked?
Well, we had to review it again.
Because it never worked?
I wouldn't agree it never worked, but we looked at the concerns of the community at large.
Anyway, besides that, the issue is whether or not then are we making any headway in relation to these issues?
Since the re-establishment, as I've said earlier on, that it's yielding positive results for us.
Do you agree with that, Lisa?
I think it is helping to improve the way that victims are treated when they go to the police. But I think in many ways the re-establishment of the unit is only part of the solution. The other half, which is the training and effective response by members in the charge office, has not happened. And I think they serve the FCS detectives very badly. If you look at the quality of statement that is taken by officers in many of the client service centres, they're really, really poor. And I don't think they assist detectives to do a meaningful investigation. And unfortunately, they're also not really well trained at all in responding effectively to survivors. One still has reports of secondary victimization. One still has reports of survivors left waiting, of being interviewed in the open and not taken into separate offices. So I think if the police are going to make a really important and significant change, not only do they need to support the FCS units to do the good work that they are doing, but they've got to pay significant attention to what's going on in the CSC.
Sure. Police aside, though, what about such campaigns as 16 days of activism? Are they really making any difference, do you think, Lisa?
I think they've made some difference, but I don't think we can expect too much from them. What I think this campaign has managed to do is make this an issue. Prior to, I think in the early 90s, mid-1990s, it really wasn't that much of an issue. I think there was a much greater degree, a sense that domestic violence, something private, keep it in your household, don't air your dirty linen in public. So I think things like the 16 days have helped shift that slightly. But it is an awareness campaign. You really can't expect 16 days once a year to change deep-seated attitudes. And I think what we need to do, because this campaign has been around for quite a long time now, is review it and think, how do we now get beyond awareness? Because I think most people will agree, even if it's only the politically correct thing to say in public, that rape is not a good idea, and nor is hitting your wife a good idea. But that's not enough. We need to, I think, start developing more challenging messages and thinking much more about prevention. And I think it has to go beyond empty slogans like men be nicer to women or real men don't hit women. That's not a terribly challenging or thought-provoking idea at all. And so I think that's where we need to shift to. And so it might be useful to reflect on some areas where we are seeing important changes. I think there's been some recent research that has shown that in 1999, 4 women were being killed every day by their intimate partners.
Mm-hmm.
By 2007, this number had dropped to 3. And it looks like the main reason for that reduction has been the introduction of the Firearms Control Act, because the greatest decrease in those murders has been the murders with firearms. So there is one important intervention. I think the next area we should be starting to look at is alcohol, because that has been shown that if you limit and regulate how freely available alcohol is, it does reduce violence. All forms of violence.
I know, for instance, that the Social Development Department is working on perhaps dealing with the adverts and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That's a debate for another day.
Yeah.
But let me hear from the United Nations then, Patrick. What are these statistics? What are you hearing about whether South Africa is making headway in this regard?
In the regard of violence against women?
Yeah, dealing with it.
Yes. Well, the first of all, it's important to remember that comparing crime statistics between different countries is very, very difficult. A crime is defined through a national piece of legislation, and that's not always comparable.
Yeah.
In relation to the 16 days in particular, South Africa is very, very active in engaging with the 16 days program. Which is, as Lisa has mentioned, probably has resulted in increased awareness and a lot more of probably also preventive effect. But when it comes to violence against women, when looking at global homicide statistics, for instance, South Africa has a rather high proportion of female victims of homicide. The majority of these are victims of homicide in a relationship. And as Lisa mentioned, although this has decreased, it is important to remember that intimate partner violence, when a woman is murdered by an intimate partner, is usually not. It is the culmination of a long process of violence.
Yeah.
And it is important to take the first occasion of violence serious from law enforcement, from the community, from society, in order to prevent a future homicide.
Your office in particular also deals with drugs and crime, and Lisa is pointing to alcohol and alcohol abuse in our society as being behind in the main some of the abuse that we report.
This is true. I mean, alcohol is what we call a criminogenic factor. It's a very, very powerful cause of crime, particularly violent crime. There's been endless studies done globally on the influence of alcohol use and alcohol abuse on violent crime. Some researchers have actually correlated changes in alcohol consumption to decrease in violent crime. So it is true. It is also important to remember, however, that as alcohol becomes an almost integral part of a culture, it is so widely available. Reducing access to it, reducing advertising may not be enough. One also has to look at what is the reason for the substance abuse. Why do people drink alcohol? Is it because of poverty? Is it because of inequality? And address also those issues.
Let me bring in the advocate now, Advocate Morero, because your structure is a new structure, the National Council Against Gender-Based Violence. In fact, it was launched just this week. I would like to know what it will do. Is it just an additional structure that is there, or will it make a difference? And if so, what kind of a difference are you envisaging?
Xolani, the intention here is actually to drive this thing to a higher level. You know, we can't have what you call 16 days of no violence against women and children as that alone. You know, as if women and children are only tortured or their rights are being violated only during those days. That's the problem that we'll be having as a country. Now the focus now is on 365 days. Whereby there will be projects and activities that will be looking at the issues of the rights of women and children. For instance, we're looking at the issue of actually coming out with policies. We're looking at the issues of coming out with partners, projects, activities throughout the year, by which we'll be able to address these issues of violation of the rights of women and children. So this is we anticipate and we hope that by the establishment of this council, we will be able to achieve a lot of things, and then we will during the course of the whole year, we'll be able to address issues as they come We don't want a situation whereby we only deal with campaigns only at the end of the year. We want this thing to be a daily issue whereby we are able to address these issues, we are able to identify them, and the projects are developed around that. That's basically what the council is all about.
But I'm just wondering whether you have any one mandate and capacity to deal with some of the issues already raised by my other guests, issues of social ills such as alcohol, drugs, and so on.
As I'm saying that we have begun. What we are going to do is that now we'll have to look at issues. What are the troubling issues? And then out of that, then we'll have to develop projects as to how then do we address that. We will be looking at issues in general, and then identifying what call strategic plans, dealing with those issues. So we don't think we will have to leave anything or any stone unturned. What we are going to do is that we have to attend to each and every case that we have, and then that will also depend whether we've got the resources or not. If we have got resources, then we'll have to address all the issues that relate to the violation of the rights of women and children.